I'm a 24-year-old male from Greece. I have studied geology and my dream was to go on even further by completing a master's degree, which would help me in the future job hunt. Unfortunately, I come from a relatively poor family, and although I never had to skip a meal due to poverty, the fees for a master's program were always above budget. Luckily enough, my cousin lives and works in Germany, so I had the chance to move in with her, find a temporary job, and later I could return to continue my studies. Everything went well, and in just a short period of time, I managed to find a job in a factory located just outside a small town near Stuttgart. The factory makes various metal parts, which are later bought by many car manufacturing companies of Germany. It was an easy job, with relatively good salary, and to be honest, I started liking it once I got the hang of it, but it was still not enough. I calculated that I would need 14 months to save up just enough. I didn't want to miss the next academic year and also to feel like a burden for my cousin, since I lived in her house free of charge. However, I knew that the night shift had a considerably higher amount of earnings, and if I found a way to only work during the night, I would collect the money I needed much faster. Once I was familiar enough with the job, my higher-ups allowed me to try the shift. It was awesome, and not just because of the money. The night shift was so much more relaxed and easygoing. No bosses, no office people checking out to see if we were competent in our jobs. No rush. We were just going out on breaks more often and making them last longer. I even got to drive the company's forklift, something normally strictly forbidden, as I had no license. It's not my fault that my boss doesn't pay for a forklift driver for the night. I mean, I had to do my job. Part of the job was throwing out the scraps of metal that were falling as the machines were cutting and forming the iron tiles. By the end of the shift, they had to be taken out and thrown away in large containers located a few meters away. I kinda liked this bit. It was a chance for me to get away from the noisy factory, calm my head, and, if the weather allowed it, admire the starry sky. That night, I was doing just that. It was around 5 a.m., and the sun wouldn't rise for at least 2 more hours. I took a trolley, loaded it up with my trash, and started heading uphill to throw the stuff away. But that night, something was different. It felt silent. Too silent. The chills in your every bone kind of silent. Never mind, I thought. Let's keep moving. I don't want to freeze out here. As I was approaching the containers, I heard the rattling of metal coming from inside one of them. A cat, I thought to myself. Though, I shut down the little voice in my head asking me why would a cat stay inside a trash bin full of nothing but sharp iron pieces. But as I approached the container, I saw nothing. 2 yellow lights, not moving at all, seemingly fixed on me. I focused more and saw that the lights were inside the container, and they looked like eyes, but without any pupils. I wasn't wrong. The lights blinked slowly, and they were back on me. I was completely frozen in my tracks. Somewhere deep inside of me, I felt like I needed to run, but in the end, I was stuck there, like a small critter before its predator, too scared to run away. After a while, the eyes turned to the side and my consciousness took control once more. I slowly turned around and headed back towards the well-lit hall, feeling more creeped out than I had ever felt in my life. I heard it behind me. It almost felt like an explosion followed by an awful sound of thousands of metal parts falling down on each other. This time, my fight or flight instinct worked, hard stuck on flight. I ran with everything I had and didn't even dare to look behind once. While running, I remember trying to convince myself it was just a cat and I was just a coward. But these eyes, these terrible eyes that had no pupils, were too far apart from each other to belong to a small creature such as a cat. I couldn't tell my colleagues, of course. They wouldn't believe me anyways, or they would just say it was me imagining stuff. As the sun rose, I managed to go home and sleep my fears away. The next night, I went to work and found the factory crowded with police cars and cops. They didn't want to tell us workers what had happened, But you know, everything is gossiped around somehow in the end. The hand belonged to Mehmet, a Syrian worker who also worked night shift. I felt terrible. Mehmet was very friendly to everyone, a smiling old guy waiting patiently to become a pensioner. He and I would sometimes drink coffee together during the long breaks while we worked. His found arm had strange bite marks all over it, and the police couldn't identify any creature that they belonged to, human or beast. Nothing more of his body was ever recovered, but what made my heart stop was that the manager told me next the hand was found in a large container for metal scraps, the one I ran from last night. I saw the creature that night too. I had the eerie feeling that I was being watched, so I lifted my eyes towards the window, only to meet these yellow eyes locked on me. The thing was looking at me. It stared right back at me. Wherever I moved, the eyes followed me, and what I felt was a light motion of its head, if it even had one. You see, it would never let me look at it. I could feel that it wanted me to know it was present, but it was always hidden in the dark, staring me down with these hellish eyes. That started to happen every night. The creature would always stalk me, but would stay right out of my sight, allowing me to only see a shadow of its body. I tried telling people about this, but they just thought I was burning out because of only working the nights. I couldn't concentrate anymore. I did mistakes in my job, broke expensive tools, and almost cost the life of one of my colleagues. In what would be a horrible accident. I got fired after that. I didn't say the truth to my cousin from fear of disappointing her. I told her that I needed some vacation, so I booked the earliest flight back home and lied to her about returning soon. In the plane, I tried to understand what was going on and why was the creature behaving like that. I knew that it wouldn't attack me during the day since I never saw it in daylight, and that I was safe, as long as I was close to lights and other people. But then, why does it keep haunting me? That moment, I had a flashback to when I was playing with my dog. My small Yorkshire Terrier loved to steal my tennis ball and run all over the house while I chased it. When I cornered it somewhere tight, I would gently pinch and snap the ball while it was still in its mouth. The angry growls of my small yet brave Yorkie were so funny that I always bursted in laughs, allowing it to run away and start the game once more. So this thing was toying with me, I guess. This moment, I felt an uneasiness I had never felt before in my life. Somehow, I knew that the creature had followed me. I was just certain of it. Probably it had a way to make me feel this way, in what I could only explain as it bonding with me in a kind of twisted and sick game. After all, why wouldn't it have just another laugh at me for a few moments that I felt secure during the plane trip? I was back home. I started spending the nights outside partying and clubbing. Not that I enjoyed that lifestyle, but it was my way of being around people during the night. Luckily, Athens is known for its nightlife, and there is always a club, which will remain open until dawn. In a club like this, I found a job as a waiter, hoping that would be enough to keep me safe. Guess I was born to work only for the night shift, I joked to myself. Of course my mom was infuriated with the career I chose, and me throwing all my old dreams out of the window, but she would never understand that this was my only hope to survive. Every evening, I would go to the club before sunset just in time to see the lights opening to welcome the first clients. What the others couldn't notice were the 2 yellow lights just outside reach, which seemed to be lit up automatically every night. When the party started, it would always be the same. The creature would be there, watching my every move, its demon eyes following my every move, never looking at anyone else but me. It felt like it had no other purpose in life but to make me suffer, to suck the last drop of willingness to live out my exhausted body, leaving nothing but a hollow piece of skin and bone, where once was a person full of dreams and hopes. I would return home feeling like I would collapse, too paranoid to stop looking behind my back, even though I knew it was well after dawn. Yesterday was my day off. I hated this day. I feel like I need to find another way to escape this nightmare every time. This time, I did the worst mistake. I took my beloved niece for a walk of the city. She's only 15 years old and looks at me like the father she never got to meet. Of course, I took it upon me to show her the nightlife of our city and walk her around listening to her teenage problems and giving her advice. Everything was going well until there was a blackout in the area. All of the lights instantly turned off. In the same moment, I saw that right before me was the thing I had so long escaped from. No one else seemed to notice its gaze during the short confusion that ensued. My niece was just a few steps away buying ice cream with the money I had just given her. For the first time since that fateful night, the creature moved his eyes away from me. It slowly turned to its side, and its eyes stopped upon my niece. She saw it too. Terrified, she ran towards me as she could still make out my figure. While she was running, I turned to look at my stalker. It was now looking back at me, and for the first time, it was smiling. The terrifying foul mouth, way too long to be human, with teeth overstacked, leaving almost no gaps in between them. I saw an amalgamation of different types of teeth, human-like, dog-like, and others I didn't even dare to specify. This only lasted for a moment. The emergency backup generators kicked in, giving some light in the previous dark area. The monster was no longer there when I looked. My niece asked me what that was, but I couldn't speak as I was shocked too. Why had it looked at her like it was looking at me? And that smile, that devilish smirk once it had locked eyes with the kid that I loved so much. Here I am now, typing this. I left a message for my niece explaining what was haunting me as best as I could. I feel like I won't have another chance to do so. Today, the city mayor warned that tests would be run all over the city to see what caused such a big blackout, and that large areas of Athens would be out of power for several hours each maybe, in a controlled power cut to identify where exactly the damage was. Of course, they warned me from the club that we wouldn't be open today due to the power cuts. I tried to see if other places would be open, but everyone told me that for the safety of their clients it would be best to not work today. It feels like the city would be dark in its entirety for the night. I guess the demon that is after me finally found the right time, and I can only hope that it hasn't gotten bored of this sick game yet. I don't. I am too scared to die. I started typing this in the afternoon after I locked myself home. My mom is on a holiday and I wouldn't want to be near my poor niece at this state for her own good. I've never felt so alone and scared in my life. In the last shades of twilight, I saw the being's eyes glowing once more. First across the street and slowly moving towards my home. As darkness covered everything, it stopped right outside my window, watching me type as fast as I could. Now, the eyes are gone. I can only hear a thumping coming from my roof. I'm so scared. I equipped myself with the largest kitchen knife I could find in my house, since I have no access to guns. I doubt it will even be helpful. The thumping has stopped. What I hear now is footsteps. Oh my god, it's finally in the house. Please, if you're reading this, save my niece. I beg you. She is too young to protect herself. Please, help her. Her address is 5, and her street name is... My name is Sean, and I'm 23 years old. I am a night security guard. I worked late at night to watch the building, and I would go back home at midnight. It's hard not to fall asleep during my shift, so I always brought some coffee and Monster to keep me awake. I was a security guard at a very tall office building. I was to check the cameras from a hidden room, and even though it was nighttime, the building still had quite a bit of people. I often got bored during the job, so I pulled out my cell phone and listened to the newest playlist I created before coming to work. It was a bunch of rock music that I was a big fan of, but sometimes, when I listen to my music, I hear knocking noises. I would yank out and hide my phone because it was the manager coming in to check on me. I wouldn't want anyone to see that I'm just listening to music, so I pretend that I was looking at the security cameras. My manager came in to check on me, and I played it cool. They asked me if I was okay, and I said I could maybe get some coffee because I didn't get to sleep a lot last night. These days, I have not been able to sleep because I have mild insomnia. He nodded and went to go get me a mug of coffee. He came back with it. I gulped it down my throat even though it was hot. My throat got a little sore. but I reached in for a cough drop from the pile next to me. He then left me to continue my job, and I went back to watch the cameras. There was one kid who just kept staring at the camera. He was like 8 or 9 years old, and he just kept staring at it, like he was looking right at me. In fact, I looked around, and everybody was looking at the cameras. I jumped back in horror, and went back to take another look. Thank goodness, the camera had a microphone, because the kid said something. He said, "Mom, there's a spider up there." Everybody then looked away from the camera, except for one woman who was next to the little boy, who was presumably his mom, and she said, "I don't see it anywhere." The boy said, "Don't you see? There's a giant spider web up there." He then pointed at the camera like he was pointing right at me. The woman then just stared at the camera and said, "You're imagining things. There's nothing there." The kid then just walked away, seeming frustrated that nobody was seeing what he was. It started getting late, like 10 o'clock, and then there were a lot less people than there were when I came in. I heard crawling noises, like a giant spider was in the room with me. You know the sounds you hear from a spider in Minecraft? Those little crawling sounds they make. Yeah, just like that. Except I wasn't playing Minecraft. I guess I got a little paranoid from the kid just pointing at the camera, and then everybody looking at it at the same time. You start hearing very small thumps, and small cracking noises in the wall when you are paranoid. Like after listening to a very scary horror story, or when you watch a very scary horror movie, or if you hear noises in the walls when you live alone. That's what was happening to me. I looked at the cameras again, and I didn't see anyone anymore. It was like everyone had left. I felt very bored and lonely now that no one was showing up on the cameras anymore. In fact, I clicked and looked through all the cameras that were in the building. I didn't see any signs of someone in the building at all. I was literally the only one. I called the manager, and they said they were still here. I said I didn't see him anywhere on the cameras, and he said he was in the bathroom. I then saw the bathroom door opening in the cameras and saw someone walking out. He said he was out of the bathroom. A few minutes later, my manager said that his shift was over, and that I would be on my own. It wasn't too scary for me, since I was used to being alone in the building while everyone else is asleep. I would just stay in my room, occasionally stand up and stretch. I watched movies on my VCR that I snuck into work while peeking at the cameras every few minutes. Even though I'm a grown man, I still love Disney movies because they make me feel like a child again. While I was watching Pinocchio, I took a peek at the camera screens. What I saw widened my eyes. The clock in one of the rooms just stopped. I decided to check my watch, but it stopped as well. The exact time of the clock that it stopped in the room. The second's hand was also frozen on the exact same spot. I figured it was some kind of impossible coincidence, so I decided to check my computer clock, and it was on the exact same time as well, except what I saw gave me chills. The second hand on the computer clock was also stopped at the exact same place as all the other clocks were stopped at. I knew this was impossible. Something was wrong. Also, the clocks on the cameras were on the exact same time too. The time was 23:59 and 59 seconds. My shift was over at midnight. I looked at the camera again, and I saw a dark spot in the corner of the room. It was very, very tall. It was more than 7 feet tall. I knew that I was the only one who worked at this time, and it stopped 1 second before my shift was over. It looked like a person, and it looked like it was holding something big. It was like a rectangular thing, like a sign that people often hold when there is a sale or something. Every few minutes, it took a step towards the camera. In the middle of the room, there was a circle of light from the small light bulb that was still glowing. So, if anything or anyone stood there, I would see them. I then noticed that black figure was slowly approaching the circle light, like it was going to reveal itself. I then ran to my telephone that was sitting right next to the computer and dialed the manager. He told me that there was no one else working in the building. I then knew that it was time to call the cops. I told the manager I was calling them, and he told me to do it now. We hung up, and I dialed the 9 button first, and then the 1 button twice after that. The operator said those well-known words like she was reading the lines of 911, what is your emergency? I told them that there was a creep inside the building that I was working in, and they said they would send someone there. They then asked me for my address, and I gave them the address of the building I was at. When I looked back at the cameras, I felt a sudden pain in my back, like a stabbing pain. I then realized how bad my back was getting these days, and that I would have to go to the chiropractor tomorrow. But what I saw under the little circle of light drew in my attention. I saw a man that I recognized as my coworker. He was holding up a sign. As I started to read it, I felt warm water sliding down my back. I assumed it was sweat since I was hot and terrified. I read the sign he was holding. It said, "Get out of here right now. He's got a knife." So, essentially, I work in a home for mentally challenged people. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of working the night shift, where I basically get paid to sleep, unless there's some sort of emergency. As a lot of you know, I'm sure, some mentally challenged people are born with physical defects, and can die at an early age. From what my coworkers have been telling me, 3 of the residents have died at the place over the last 3 years, all from heart attacks. I've always felt weird about treading on grounds where I know certain people have died, so that alone creates a spooky atmosphere for me. I'm basically working there as a summer job before starting college, so this was just my 3rd time working the night shift. Only, this time, I forgot my sleeping pill. I need the pills or I won't be able to fall asleep for hours no matter what. It's essentially just an apartment complex, not very big. There are about 12 residents in total. If you walk through the main entrance of the building, there's stairs leading up the office on the left, and one of the residents' apartments on the right. Before the stairs is another resident's apartment on the left, and the kitchen with living room on the right. Quite a small area. To access other apartments, you'll have to go outside, and enter through other doors. Now to how my evening has progressed. I arrive at my workplace and walk up into the office to greet my coworker. He tells me everyone had just been given their medication, and that I'm going to be alone in the building, because the 2 residents in the main building are sleeping in the apartment of another resident. I think to myself that I'm fortunate, because I'm even more likely to have a peaceful night of sleep. All coworkers have been telling me it's quiet at night always though, because all residents are on some sort of medication that makes them sleepy. Anyways, I sit down and do some reading on my book until I'm sleepy. This is when I realize that I forgot my sleeping pill, as well as the fact that it's really warm inside, despite there being quite cold, heavily windy weather outside. Kind of like the setting for Sleepy Hollow, I guess. You can hear the wind and see the trees wavering outside. I decide to open the window. The office is on the 2nd floor, mind you, with sloping walls, so the window is tilted a bit upwards, and it gives the office bedroom a really claustrophobic touch. So I get stripped and lay down in bed, realizing I'm never going to be able to fall asleep. No matter the effort, I can't fall asleep. And at around 11:30 p.m., there's a big radio clock next to the bed, so it's easy to keep track of when certain events that night happened, and the fun begins. You know what is said about animals having the ability to see supernatural phenomena that aren't apparent to humans, right? Well, just across the building is another house, where an elderly couple lives. All of a sudden, I can hear their big Rottweiler running on their tiles to its fence, and suddenly, it starts barking. I could hear the dog running on the tiles, but I hadn't heard anything that might have started it, and it sounds like it's just barking at the room I'm in. After about 5 minutes, the couple finally get their dog inside. As soon as they're gone, I suddenly feel so alone though, and that's when I hear it. A sound coming from the roof, right around the window entrance. It was like the monster from The Grudge. A dry, malicious growling. It only lasted for a few seconds, but it was enough time to make me realize that I'm not exactly the macho boss that I thought I would be in case I should encounter something like this. Well, the sound died out. I'm sweating pretty badly, with adrenaline pumping. My mind was already induced with thoughts of horror because I had been reading quite a few stories on no sleep that evening to pass time. A few minutes after it comes again. I want to tell myself so badly it's just the building. But it sounds so human. It fades out again, only to be replaced by a slow knocking. It sounded like somebody pounding their knuckle into the roof very rhythmically. First, there was like 5 seconds between each knock, then 10, 20, and more, until it finally stopped completely. During this time, I actually grabbed my phone and texted a friend that I am scared. After it stopped, I thought I was finally going to be able to have some peace, and maybe even get some sleep. Despite being soaked in sweat, every time I squinted through my eyes, I felt like I saw twisted faces everywhere, even though all I saw was my pile of clothes in the darkness. I was so pumped on adrenaline, and the slightest thing would make me jump up. I think what scared me the most was the uncertainty, you know? I felt like I was part of the plot of a horror movie, where the main character doubts his own sanity, whether what the person hears is completely normal, or actually is supernatural occurrences. And the fact that I wouldn't know what to do in case some kind of monster showed up scared me so badly. The room took its toll on me, as it was, since I'm a bit claustrophobic, and I would be totally pinned back in case something came in. So there I am in bed, completely on edge, when I hear the most spine-shivering cat hissing. I literally had some sort of spasm, because it was the last thing I expected to hear. Apparently, one of the neighbor's cats was right below the window, and just hissing aggressively at nothing. I didn't dare go look through the window for the fear of being met by yellow eyes and a dead face. So, I decided to just stay in bed, and try to tell myself that nothing was going to happen. After about 2 minutes, the cat stopped. Again, I finally thought it was all over, that I could just go to sleep and have had a bumpy night before that. That's when I hear the main entrance door opening, which is literally just below the bed I'm sleeping in. Started to feel like I was in paranormal activity. I heard some really heavy, very slow footsteps, but not very loud, below me. I was terrified that I was going to hear the sound of the first footstep on the wooden stairs. Thankfully, it sounded like the footsteps heading into the living room downstairs. It was excruciatingly terrifying, like slow mental torture. Listening to the footstep over and over again, until it finally became so faint that I couldn't hear it anymore. At this point in time, I've made my mind up, and somehow made myself get up, and in my most vulnerable, naked state, make it through the darkness out of the office to the stairs. I needed to know it was just some person down there, even though that would be just as creepy, and not something else. In the darkness, I slowly walked down the stairs, as quietly as I can. Fear was literally pumping through my veins at this point. My main thought was that I was so scared that all of a sudden I would hear loud, fast running out of the living room towards me at the stairs, accompanied by some sort of demonic growl. Fortunately, nothing happened, and I finally make it into the living room. Felt like time was 10 times slower, just to play a cruel joke on me, to make me really feel the fear. I managed to find the light switch, and the only thing I see was still a bit unsettling. One of the windows at the other side of the room was open. This is highly unusual for my workplace. I'm pretty much the only person who ever bothers opening a window. Of course, I decide somehow that I would feel safer if I closed it. So, I walk around the table in the living room to get to the window, still with completely shredded nerves. As I start to raise my arm to reach out for the window handle, the window slams shut with full force in my face, and I hear the wind blowing violently by. This made my muscles tense up so bad, and I want to just shout and curse, instead of quickly turning the handle and starting to prepare for one of the things I dread the most in the darkness, turning around. In my mind, I start preparing lines I'm gonna say, if some horrific creature is waiting right behind me, with glowing eyes, smiling with a black-toothed grin in the dark. "Sup, bro," is what I settle on saying should I encounter anything, as if that should keep it from doing whatever it wants to me. But it keeps me a bit calmer. I finally make it up to the bedroom, where I take my freaking laptop and watch the finals of the Mortal Kombat tournament. and afterwards SC2, while trying to fall asleep. I was just so relieved and felt so safe listening to the commentators of the tournament talking about a video game. Like I wasn't alone anymore, and finally managed to fall asleep. The next morning, I asked if anyone had been in the main building, and nobody had been over there. I was desperate for an explanation, and when a coworker arrived to take the next shift, I asked if she ever noticed anything weird or any sounds at night. She said no, and tried to come up with some sort of explanation, but couldn't. I didn't know if I felt more or less comfortable with her answer, but finally, I could get in the car and drive home. When I arrived back at work later, the other day, my boss guilted me into taking another night shift this Thursday, despite every fiber in my body screaming no. But apparently, I like sleeping around for money. I'm gonna go to bed now. Hopefully you won't hear anything weird within the confinities of my own home. I hope it was a decent read. I'm scared for this Thursday's night shift though. Thanks for watching, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your story, my email and subreddit will be in the description below. And also, if you're not subscribed, please do if you want. And don't forget to like and comment as well. Have beautiful nightmares. And I will see you next time.